lead midwife at the Royal Wolverhampton Trust, and I've got a very special guest with me today who's our infant feeding coordinator, and it's Louise Thompson. Hi Louise, can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Lou Thompson. I'm infant feeding lead at New Cross in maternity. I'm a nurse by background and I've been working in infant feeding for about 15 years now. I'm also a lactation consultant and I do the tongue tie procedure as well.
So how did you get into infant feeding?
Well, I've always been interested in breastfeeding, then I started working as a nurse and I spent time working on the neonatal unit, and I saw how important breast milk was to preterm babies. So when I had my own children and my own feeding experience, I became even more interested. And so I got a job on the neonatal unit as feeding lead there, and then from that went on to be lead for maternity over in Birmingham, and then I've recently, 2 years ago now, come to New Cross.
Oh, that's amazing. Would you say you enjoy your job?
I absolutely love it. I always say I can't believe how lucky I am to do something that I'm so passionate and interested in, and get paid for it. It's wonderful.
It's nice, isn't it? It's like you're living a dream then. You are literally doing your dream job.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. So, as we know, infant feeding is such a huge part of pregnancy. Most women and people, when they're pregnant, they are often thinking about how they were going to feed their babies. So can you tell me how people can prepare for that journey and just get themselves organised and try and learn as much as they can?
Yeah, so there's lots of things that you can do while you're pregnant and thinking about feeding your baby. Getting lots of information is really helpful, but preparing yourself for bonding with your baby. So even little things like talking to your bump and responding to bump when you feel those movements and things. Speaking to my microphone went funny, sorry. Speaking to your bump, reading stories to bump, and that sort of responsiveness will really help when your baby's born, because babies who thrive and do really well are those ones who where the parents are in tune with them and respond to them when they show feeding cues and things like that, and all that responsiveness and love and nurturing starts when your baby's growing inside.
It's that connection, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And starting to build that relationship, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. And things like finding out about what's available in your area. So we're really lucky in Wolverhampton. There's lots of groups available, and you can attend those antenatally and speak to staff who've had training in infant feeding and been where you are, and they can talk to you about any concerns or worries and talk to you about how to get off to a good start. There's lots of information online as well. So there's the NHS website's got good information, but there's really good websites like Global Health Media, and they've got brilliant videos on there with watching your baby breastfeed and having that skin-to-skin contact to start with, and you just see the baby's crawling and latching onto the breast and see what a really good breastfeed looks like, because for a lot of us our real first experience of a baby is our own baby, and it's a big shock, isn't it? So
it is. I think it's different watching somebody else feeding, but when it's your baby and you're doing it, it's completely different, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
So these breastfeeding groups then, Lou, can you tell me more about them? Where are they, and do you know how people can access them?
So there are groups on throughout the week in Wolverhampton, and if you go to the Breastfeeding in Wolverhampton Facebook group, there'll be an up-to-date list there of what groups are on, but there's a group on every day, either virtual or face-to-face, and so you're able to go along to those, and they're throughout the city as well, so there should be one quite close to you. We've also got feeding support in the community as well, so if you're a Wolverhampton resident, we can arrange for feeding support to come out and see you, and they're a really lovely team of staff, and you can come in and see us in the hospital as well, and that's before you have your baby and when baby's born as well. So we know lots of women will have had experiences where feeding hasn't perhaps gone to plan with previous babies, and they might have worries about this next pregnancy and next baby. And so we really encourage those moms to get in touch with us, and then we can speak through what happened last time and maybe try and prevent problems this time, or help you manage those problems if they do occur again.
Yeah, I think it's really useful to share that, because a lot of people think that breastfeeding groups are for, you know, postnatal groups, and they think you have to turn up with your baby. But obviously some people are just pregnant and they just want to know more about it, so it's a really good place to go and find out more information.
Absolutely, yeah. And there are no silly questions either.
Definitely.
You know, if you're worried about it, then the chances are another mum's worried about it too. So, you know, just ask.
I know we do breastfeeding events as well, don't we?
We
From
do.
Wolverhampton Trust.
Yeah. So there's we celebrate National Breastfeeding Week. Yeah, absolutely. And there's lots of events going on throughout the year. So I'd encourage you to join that Facebook group and see what's going on and follow along on there, because it's really good and kept up to date.
Yeah, and we also work really closely with the local authority, so they've got their USP staff as well, who also support with infant feeding, and that's another opportunity for you to find out more about infant feeding.
Absolutely, yeah.
So can you tell me more about the benefits of breastfeeding, Lou?
So breast milk's an amazing substance. It's evolved over millions of years, and it's a living fluid as well. So it's got loads of protective factors in it. It's not just about nutrition, it's about protecting your baby and priming their immune system. So I don't know, Sunita, you probably do know because you're a midwife, but lots of people might not be aware that when you know, in this environment, in the room that we're in now, there's lots of germs sort of floating around, and our bodies are constantly fighting battles and protecting us against germs. When you're breastfeeding, you either swallow pathogens or inhale, or if your baby's got something on them and you kiss them, you'll absorb those pathogens, and then you'll produce antibodies that help protect you against what's in your environment. But those antibodies also go straight into the breast milk, and they help protect your baby as well. So it's like immune therapy, protecting your baby. It doesn't stop babies getting infections, but it really reduces the risk. And we know that babies who are breastfed are much less likely to get respiratory infections, gastroenteritis, things like that, and they get viral fragments as well that help protect them against viruses. So and that breast milk, it's dynamic, it's changing all the time as well.
I remember reading when I was doing my training a long time ago, but they used to say things like when babies are breastfed, their jaw develops differently and it makes them, their speech is apparently clearer. Is that true?
Yeah, so jaw development, the way breastfeeding's a really active process, so babies really have to use their tongue and their jaw, and it does help with teeth spacing and jaw development, definitely. And that closeness and that you know, looking into your baby's eyes and responding to them, all that helps with development as well.
Oh, that's amazing. What about benefits for mom?
So for mom, there's evidence that breastfeeding reduces the risk of some breast cancers and ovarian cancers. It can help with reduction in risk of osteoporosis in later life as well. You'd sort of think breastfeeding takes calcium away from your bones, and it does sort of use some of that calcium in your body. But what we find is that when women who've breastfed, their bone density is stronger than a woman who hasn't, so it can help with that as well.
And some ladies often believe that it helps with losing weight as well.
It's an interesting one with the losing weight. So yeah, there is evidence that breastfeeding does help you lose some of that weight. Breastfeeding uses about 500 calories a day. So, you know, you do find that some women will breastfeed and lose weight quite quickly. For some other women, they might find that because they're breastfeeding so much, they're really hungry, so they need to eat a bit, feel like they eat a bit more than normal, and they might not feel like they're losing the weight while they're breastfeeding. But the evidence seems to show that when they stop breastfeeding, they'll get back to birth weight quicker than perhaps if they hadn't breastfed at all. So it is supportive, but you might not always feel like that when you're craving chocolate, but there's nothing wrong with that.
Oh, it's good to know the factors. Isn't it? What about women who feel that they need to eat a specific diet to produce more breast milk? What would your advice be on that?
So with breastfeeding, it's eat to hunger, really. So if you're hungry, eat. A good healthy diet is good for us because we feel better when we eat better. But you don't need a specific diet when you're breastfeeding. Eat what you enjoy. Obviously, you're caring for a baby, and that takes a lot of energy. So you want to fuel your body. But if you fancy things that, you might not always think of as health foods, you're still going to produce beautiful breast milk. And lots of women worry and sort of think, I'm not eating very well, I'm not looking after myself in that way, my breast milk won't be very good. It's not the way that breastfeeding works. So breastfeeding, if you eat, your body will take what it needs from your body to produce the breast milk. You don't need to eat a specific diet.
I'm really glad you've said that, because I'm sure we've got lots of families listening, so pregnant people and their extended family around them. And often what I hear is that my mother-in-law has said to me not to eat spicy food because then that will go into your milk and then baby will get diarrhea. So could you just talk to us about that and if it's true?
I think really try not to eat too much of one thing is probably a good thing to sort of say, like a balanced mixed diet. Sometimes people do find if they eat a lot of one sort of food, then that might seem to make baby have a bit more of a loose stool. But anyone who's breastfed a baby will know that breast milk poo is quite explosive and loose anyway.
It is. Yellow and very soft, and that's normal, isn't it?
Yeah, and breast milk does take on the flavour of what you've eaten. So often think strong flavours like garlic, lemon. Sometimes you can smell that in the breast milk. So some of those spices can come through potentially. So probably everything in moderation. Maybe don't go for a spicy, but look at your baby. If baby's doing okay, then things are probably all right. Another thing to say as well, as you said, with the specific diet, there aren't any foods that are shown to boost milk supply, but I know culturally there'll be lots of things that families will say, eat this because it will help your supply. And if you've got someone who cares about you, cooking for you, take that stuff, because that care and attention and support that you get is going to help you build that loving bond around your baby and support you. So absolutely.
Also, I always say to women that your baby's already used to whatever food you eat because they've had it during pregnancy.
Absolutely.
So the same amount has probably passed through the placenta, so they're already used to it. So eating those foods after the baby's born is not likely to upset their tummy.
Yeah, that's true. And the amniotic fluid takes on the flavours of what we eat, just like the food does. And then you think this little one, when you're introducing solid food, is going to be eating familial foods. You probably wouldn't start a baby off when they're having solids at around 6 months on the spiciest things anyway. So it sort of makes sense.
But culturally, I think some cultures do. They introduce obviously not spicy, but just a slight flavour.
Oh, absolutely.
And some people believe it's good to give lots of different food to baby just to get them used to it. Yeah. And that supports the breastfeeding that they can continue with.
Absolutely, yeah, because breast milk tastes different every time. It takes on those flavours that you're eating.
Do you think women should be drinking more when they're breastfeeding? Because that's something else that we used to say, make sure you're drinking, because babies, you don't want to become dehydrated if you're breastfeeding all the time and you're not drinking enough yourself.
Yeah, that's another really good point. So again, with breastfeeding, your body will take what it needs to produce the breast milk. And so you'll produce good amounts of breast milk, but it's you who will suffer if you're not drinking enough. So we know that if we're not drinking enough, we do feel thirsty, we feel dehydrated, we're likely to become more constipated. And so it's a good idea when you sit down and breastfeed to sit down with a drink next to you, so you're drinking while baby's drinking, and that really helps. But you don't necessarily need to drink more to produce more breast milk. The way breastfeeding works and breast milk supply works is on supply and demand basis. So the more you breastfeed or the more you express, the more milk you should produce. It's not about eating more or drinking more, but obviously you need to look after yourself, don't you, and feel good and eat and drink. Eat to hunger and drink to thirst.
I think it's a good excuse to you sit down and feed your baby.
Absolutely.
And ask your friends and family who are around to look after you. They can bring you food, bring you drinks.
Absolutely, absolutely. No one breastfeeds on their own either, do they? Yeah, you need a team.
What about, so we obviously encourage women to take pregnancy multivitamins during pregnancy, and I don't personally, when I'm in community, I don't encourage postnatal or breastfeeding vitamins, but should we be encouraging them? Is there a space for them? Are they needed? Or what's the advice on the breastfeeding vitamins that I have seen?
So you don't need to take a specific breastfeeding vitamin, but we know, don't we, in the UK, we live in this cloudy country. I think sunshine. It is sunny today, but that's unusual. And lots of us will be vitamin D deficient. So it's good for all of us to be taking vitamin D. And babies in Wolverhampton will get vitamin D supplements from the health visitor. So that's the one supplement that we would definitely say go for. But if you're eating a nice, normal, healthy diet, then you should be okay. There's no need to take any specific breastfeeding vitamins.
Okay. And what about some women who don't really have a healthy diet or don't eat a lot? Do you think they should take breastfeeding vitamins, or is the advice still the same that it's not something that we routinely recommend that people should be doing?
I think if you're, during pregnancy, you should have had probably quite a few blood tests, so you should be aware if you're deficient in anything, and then those are the things to sort of focus on. Sometimes the B vitamins are low, aren't they, and things like that. But often what you find is specific vitamin packages are more expensive for breastfeeding, and we can feel and as mums we often feel guilty, or we should be buying the best and doing the best. So maybe, if you feel like you're low in something and you've had that confirmed with the blood test, then take the vitamins for that. But or if you feel like your diet isn't very good, then maybe take a multivitamin. But there's no need necessarily for a specific breastfeeding multivitamin.
Oh, thank you for that. I think a lot of ladies that I meet, they often feel like they need to be buying, breastfeeding vitamins while they're pregnant, and sometimes they're struggling to buy other things, and we've got the cost of living crisis.
Absolutely.
So it's really good to get that confirmation that they don't have to take them.
No.
So as long as they're eating well themselves, then that should be enough for baby.
Yeah.
That's really good. So what about people who ask about how long they should be breastfeeding for?
Okay, so this is a great question, and it's one where there's a few sort of different answers to say. The World Health Organization recommend breastfeeding for up to 2 years and beyond. But when we hear that message as mums, as new mums, the thought of 2 years stretching out ahead of you can be really daunting. Yeah. Exclusive breastfeeding and milk feeding, babies should be breastfed for the first 6 months of life, and then into the next for the next 2 years. But we want to support you to breastfeed for as long as you want to feed for. So and with breastfeeding, it's 2 years and beyond. So so lots of women will breastfeed for much longer than that. And the global weaning age, so the global sort of average age for when babies and children stop breastfeeding in lots of cultures is around 5 to 7 years old. So there will be people who are breastfeeding their children much longer, and usually your child tells you when they're ready to stop, and it's often a reciprocal thing. So mum feels like, actually, I'm ready to stop, or the child feels like they're ready to stop. But we welcome and support any and all breastfeeding. So.
Just a question that I thought of while you were talking is what about mums that are maybe breastfeeding and then they become pregnant again? So how would that journey change?
Okay, so
or does it not?
Well, breastfeeding when you're exclusively breastfeeding with babies, when they breastfeed, Sunita,
Yeah,
they
I
feed
know.
really frequently, don't they? So if a woman's exclusively breastfeeding with, and baby's not sleeping through the night, having frequent feeds every 2 to 3 hours at least, then that can help reduce your fertility while you're breastfeeding. It isn't 100% reduction, but some people do use it as a form of contraception. But if baby is sleeping for longer periods or having formula milk as well, if mum's periods return as well while she's breastfeeding in that exclusive breastfeeding time, then that might be a sign that fertility is returning. But sorry, just could you just go through what you said
Yeah,
again?
it was
'Cause I feel
about
like I've
when
gone
you
off.
become pregnant again and you're still breastfeeding.
Oh, okay.
So you've gone through your
Oh, I see.
pregnancy,
So
you may have
yeah.
continued to breastfeed, or some women actually stop, and I do say they didn't need to.
Yeah.
But sometimes that just needs a bit of clarification for the women. So should
Yeah.
they stop, or can they continue? And how does your body start to continue to produce more milk for new baby?
So, you can absolutely carry on
Yes.
breastfeeding, and lots of mums will tandem feed, so
Yeah.
they'll breastfeed the one child and then become pregnant again, carry on breastfeeding until that new baby's born, and then breastfeed that other one, the new
new one.
baby. What sometimes happens is, what happens is when you become pregnant, your breast milk sort of reverts back to being a bit more like
changes.
colostrum, so
Yes.
it changes taste a little bit, quite a lot really. And so sometimes your toddler or older baby will stop breastfeeding, or
Naturally,
maybe
yeah.
become a bit fussy because of the change in taste. Lots of children don't; they carry on absolutely fine, but some children will naturally stop, or mums might notice a bit of a change in the breast milk as well. But yeah, you can absolutely carry on breastfeeding, no problems, and feed, and you will be producing enough milk for that new baby. And your older child as well, because the older child's probably going to be on solid food as well,
Yes.
and not
And not
drinking
need
quite
as
so
much.
much anyway. Yeah.
So when the new baby is born, is there still colostrum there again for the first 3 days?
So probably what you'll find is you've got larger volumes than
Yeah.
you might have done if you'd have
Yeah.
stopped breastfeeding and then started feeding again. But yeah, there should be, if everything's gone okay first time round and you've had a good milk supply, then you probably find that you'll have a greater supply.
That's quite reassuring. I get lots of questions. I do an antenatal group every Monday, and once every 5 weeks, and we do get the infant feeding team to come in and deliver these sessions. And these are some of the questions that do come across. That's why I'm just thinking of them now as you're talking.
That's a really good question, definitely. Yeah.
But a lot of mums feel like they have to stop breastfeeding because unless they do, they feel like they're not going to have enough milk for new baby. So that's really reassuring that they can continue, and then colostrum's there again, ready for new baby when baby arrives.
And our bodies are amazing; they
Aren't they
adapt
just?
so well. And with each pregnancy, you'll get more of a milk supply, an increase in milk supply.
Oh, well, I hope that's reassured lots of mums who may be pregnant and considering breastfeeding again on this journey. So we are heading into a break now, and we will continue this session on infant feeding, on maternity matters. So we'll continue that shortly after the break. Thank you. Welcome back to Maternity Matters, and we're in conversation with Lou Thompson. So we were talking about infant feeding, and where we left off, we just started on the topic of tandem feeding, so the possibility of feeding a toddler and a newborn baby. While we're on that subject, I was hoping we could just talk about twins and what that journey might look like for a twin mum.
Yeah, so it's absolutely possible to breastfeed twins, and we've got lots of mums in Wolverhampton who have done that successfully. We've also got with the USPs, the Community Feeding Support Team.
Yeah.
They're really supportive as well, and the hospital staff. But one of our USPs is a twin mum who's been there, and so
lots of experience to share.
So the twin midwife at New Cross will often, will always actually refer mums to us if they'd like a referral, and then we make sure we make contact with mums antenatally, so before the babies are born, and talk to them about how to get off to a good start, and we can put them in touch with community support as well. So yeah, it's absolutely possible. It is logistically handling babies, holding the two of them, getting off to a good start can be, a bit
practical.
Sort of positioning
how to hold
babies.
two babies.
And some mums will find that they perhaps, feed one baby at a time to start off with, because to try and get that latch nice and comfortable and effective before they move on to feeding babies together. But it's absolutely possible to get there and feed babies both at the same time.
And mums are learning too, aren't they? So
absolutely.
It's such a learning curve, really, for mum and babies.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say, and I'm not the only one, breastfeeding is normal and natural, but it's not always easy. And, trust your instincts, but get support, because there's lots of support out there, and no one does it on their own. Get that support.
I think you're right there. Breastfeeding support is very different now to what it used to be years ago. When I first became a midwife, it was very much, you just had the midwife, really. So you visited, and some ladies, if they did struggle, they often ended up giving up. But now it's really good to see that there are infant feeding teams, and they can come and see you in the hospital as well. So when you've had your babies, I know all midwives and all support workers are trained in breastfeeding. So how do you support or give that additional support to women in the hospital when they're starting to struggle, or maybe they're not sure about how their breastfeeding journey has started, and am I holding the baby correctly? Am I doing this right?
Yeah. So a lot of what families and mums worry about is, like you say, am I doing it right? Have I got enough breast milk? And often things are actually going well, but we don't always have the confidence in our own bodies. So it's really important that women know how to get off to a good start with feeding, and just knowing what's normal for breastfeeding. So a healthy baby who's born term, so sort of after around 40 weeks, in that first 24 hours of life, we want them to feed in that first hour. So that's why we encourage skin to skin when your baby's born. And skin to skin is wonderful, but it's not just about bonding with your baby. It's your baby. You sort of see them go into skin to skin on your chest, and they're sort of plugged back into the mothership, I think, and then
that's a nice way of putting it.
And they have that little rest because they've just been born, and it's a massive change to them. And then what babies do is they do something called the breast crawl, and listeners, if they have got chance, Google the breast crawl and watch those babies doing it. There's lots of videos out there on YouTube of babies doing the breast crawl. Babies are able to, when they're born healthy and term, able to crawl to the breast and latch themselves onto the breast with just a little bit of support from mum. So having that first feed, it takes them, if they do the crawl, it takes them about 50 minutes to an hour to get there, because they slowly wriggle and move and turn their head, and then have that first feed. So when they have that first breastfeed, that starts to switch on all the milk making cells in the breast, and then babies sleep after that. And then when we sleep, you'll know if you've ever been on a study day or anything, you feel really tired afterwards. So you sleep, and all that brain wiring goes on, and baby remembers how to feed well next time. So when they wake up next, they're more likely to have a
lots
good
of
feed
practice,
next
isn't it?
time. And again, that extra feeding is switching on all those milk making cells and setting up a good supply for later on. So in the first 24 hours of life, babies might not feed that often, but they do need to feed effectively, and they do need to feed. So they might only feed about 4 times in the first 24 hours, because when they're born, they've got lots of fluid in their body, and they've got special fat that they can use. So they're not super duper hungry when they're first born, but they just need to feed effectively. After that first 24 hours, that's when they really start to feed a lot. They might feed more in the first 24 hours, but after the first 24 hours, they'll feed at least 8 times really, but it's often more than that, and that can take mums by surprise. So we talk about feeding your baby responsively. So feed your baby when they're telling you they're hungry, and those early signs that they're hungry is when they're chewing their fingers or licking their lips or wriggling around and starting to tell you that they'd like a feed, show you the cues.
Yes. I'm really glad you touched on that, because I've met ladies who are 3 days postnatal, they're at home, and when I ask about feeding, often they say, oh, well, I was told the baby will only feed. Not very often. I don't need to wake the baby.
Yeah.
And when I've asked, sometimes they've said to me the baby hasn't fed for a good 8-9 hours.
Oh gosh.
And so sometimes they feel they get that inconsistent advice, because they think that the hospital have said that you just need to feed, like you said, four times in 24 hours.
Yeah.
But they just need to be aware that that advice does change. So after 24 hours, they should be feeding, like you said, up to 8 times a day, or more often.
Yeah, at least 8
needs.
times a day. And I think that's sometimes what we say in hospital to make sure everything's safe can be not misinterpreted, or we perhaps don't always explain ourselves very well. So we'll often say feed your baby when they're telling you they're hungry, feed them when they're showing rooting cues, and don't leave them any longer than 3 hours between feeds. And sometimes that's interpreted as feed your baby 3 hourly, and that's not what we mean, because anyone who's breastfed a baby will know they feed a lot. They need to feed really regularly, because if so 3 hours is quite a long time for a breastfed baby to go, so they might want to feed after half an hour or an hour. But there's really good information about signs that your baby's feeding well. And when you go home from hospital, you'll have your red book, and in the red book there's a breastfeeding assessment in there, and that goes through all those signs of effective feeding. There's also the leaflets that you go home with after the best start, and that talks about signs. But that frequent feeding and effective feeding is what baby needs to switch on that milk supply. And I was just going to say as well, just to dispel the myth about breastfeeding being painful. Breastfeeding should be comfortable. If it's painful, there's a problem with how baby's latched on the breast. So if you're experiencing breast pain, nipple pain, don't put up with it. Get help, because we can make breastfeeding more comfortable, and it should be pain-free. And when it's pain-free and the baby's latched on nice and really well, then they'll get more milk and you'll have a better supply. And who wants to do it when you're in pain? Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's really important to just remind everybody then that if your baby is asleep, that it is okay to wake them up to feed them.
Absolutely.
At that 3 hour mark, and not to let babies sleep for too long, because then they're ending up with less milk in 24 hours, aren't they? So we need the regular feeds to help them put the weight on.
Yeah, and I always think about it from the baby's point of view. You sort of think your baby spent 9 months being fed constantly, through the cord and swallowing amniotic fluid all the time. And when we think about ourselves as well, I don't know about you, Sunita, but when I'm at home and I'm in the kitchen, I might have my breakfast, I'm going to have a cup of tea, I'm going to have a cup of coffee, I'll have a biscuit. If there's chocolates on the side, I'm going to eat those as well, and nobody is going to tell me that I fed 3 hours ago. So
that's interesting. So if somebody, it's like when people stop a feed as well. If you're having your dinner, you wouldn't want to be interrupted, would you? You wouldn't want somebody to take your plate away. So equally we should. So how long should a feed be? So I've said we shouldn't stop a feed. Because
Yeah.
people do say, oh, the baby's been on for 20 minutes, that's enough, and then I stopped. So
Yeah.
I don't encourage that. I do say, let baby finish the feed.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the feeding assessment is in the Red Book, and the staff in hospital should talk to you about signs of effective feeding. And one of the signs of effective feeding is that length of the feed. So babies feed anything between 5 minutes and about 45 minutes at each feed. So some feeds will be long and some feeds will be short. And because some meals, some feeds are a big meal and some are a snack. Also, it's important just to say you can't overfeed a breastfed baby. Feed them when they want to be fed, and often that's something that's parents might think, I've only fed you an hour ago, you can't be hungry again. And so sometimes mums might worry that they haven't got enough milk, but actually what's babies doing is they're feeding again to stimulate your milk supply so that you make more milk. They're sort of putting the order in for your milk supply to increase. And so
and you're in tune with your baby, aren't you?
Absolutely.
So the more you feed, the more you make, so to speak.
The other thing about length of feed is when a baby's breastfeeding effectively, especially when your milk volumes have increased, which is around about day 3. So you have colostrum in the first few days, and lots of women worry that they haven't got enough milk, don't they?
That was my next question.
Yeah,
yes,
but
we can carry on with that.
So lots of women worry because we see big bottles of formula, and then perhaps you try and hand express and you only see a few drops. Babies, when they're born, their tummies are quite small, and they need to feed like little and often, these small volumes of milk. But when they're born, they've got lots of extra fluid in their body, lots of extra fat, so they don't need loads in that first
that
24,
keeps them going,
40.
doesn't it? The brown fat that they've stored in pregnancy.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you have colostrum in small amounts. It's concentrated nutrition, and it's small amounts deliberately in the first few days, just as baby's body's adapting to the outside world.
Rich. It's very rich.
It is, and it helps them do those first poos as well.
Yeah.
So feeding like that for the first few days, and then the milk volume will increase usually at around about day 3, and women will feel more fullness. And when you see that happening, what baby does when they breastfeed is they suck fast to start off with, and then they encourage the milk to flow, and then you'll see them do these deep sucks and swallows with pauses in between. So 1 suck to 1 swallow, or 2 sucks to 1 swallow, and then they're transferring the milk. As they get towards the end of the feed, they do this little bit of flutter sucking, which you might have seen, and that's when they're just finishing the feed off. And it's really important that they do that flutter sucking because it helps set up a really good milk supply for next time. Sometimes parents think, oh, you're using me as a dummy, you're not feeding effectively, but let baby come to the end of the feed, like you've said, and come off the breast by themselves. And that's what we see. Babies have a lovely breastfeed when they sort of let go of the breast, and they look like milk drunk, which is lovely. And they've had
enough. It's a nice sight, isn't it?
It is. But if they're feeding for longer than sort of 45 minutes, so sometimes we hear mums say, oh, they're feeding for an hour or an hour and a half, then actually probably what's happening is they're not on the breast effectively. They're falling asleep on there. They're not getting enough milk. And if they're falling asleep on there, that's a bit of a red flag. So get some feeding support, and we can help.
I'm glad you've mentioned that. My next question was, sometimes breastfeeding can be challenging when you first start, and like you said, babies can often be sleepy, and you can get them to latch on, but if they're not suckling and drinking, how else can mums, parents give milk to babies? So it can still be express breast milk or breast milk. What other ways can we use rather than using bottles and teats?
Yeah, so we try, if we're wanting to breastfeed, we try and avoid using bottles, because it can just, babies can get used to using the bottles, and it can confuse them a little bit, make it more tricky to latch onto the breast. So when you're in hospital, we encourage you to express your breast milk if baby's not feeding effectively. If you've got small amounts of colostrum, we've got colostrum syringes, so the little 1 ml syringes that you can collect the colostrum in, and then you can give that directly to baby into their mouth, so just into the pouch between the cheek and the gum line. Often get baby to suck on your finger and then pop a few drops in, and that helps them swallow the milk. But colostrum syringes should only be really used in hospital for small amounts of milk. If you're giving larger volumes of milk, so 5 mils, around about that, you can give it with a plastic spoon. So put some milk onto the spoon and just pop it by baby's lip and let them lap it up. Or we have little cups as well, and the cups can be used to give babies milk. And we've got the infant feeding team have got some of those as well.
And should people be sterilising these spoons and cups when they're at home?
Yeah, so just sterilise everything in the way that you normally would, washing hot soapy water, rinse under the cold tap, and then sterilise before use.
Brilliant. So you mentioned expressing breast milk. When can pregnant women or people start doing that?
So you start producing colostrum from around 16 weeks pregnant. So you might see some milk at your breast any time after that, although it's not that common early on, but it is starting to be produced. We wouldn't recommend expressing until around about 37 weeks. So if your pregnancy is low risk and we're not worried about baby coming early, then you can start expressing at about 36 weeks. If your pregnancy is higher risk, then we'd say 37 weeks, because that's when the baby's considered term. We've got nice leaflets with information about antenatal expressing, that's what we call it, antenatal expressing or colostrum harvesting. You don't have to do it to have a good milk supply, but what we do find is women who express before baby's born feel a bit more confident with their milk supply, so they know how to express, they've seen their body can do it, and sometimes they've got a little stash there of expressed breast milk that they keep in the freezer at home, and if baby doesn't get off to a good start with feeding for whatever reason, then you've got some milk there that you can give to baby.
Yes. So when women are expressing breast milk after 37 weeks, if they successfully manage to get some syringes, and obviously we recommend that they freeze them, should they be bringing that into the hospital or do they keep it at home?
So at the moment we'd say leave your syringes at home in the freezer, because if you're coming in either for a section or coming in labour, we're not quite sure when your baby's going to be born. Once that milk starts defrosting, we need to use it, once it comes out of the freezer, we need to use it within 24 hours. And sometimes we've had mums who expressed loads of antenatal colostrum, done really well, brought it all into hospital, and then perhaps been in labour for more than 24 hours, so then we can't use that milk. Also, we have to store it in the fridge, and there's all those things, whereas if you leave it at home, if you do need it, then potentially someone can pop home and get it for baby. But the good thing is you know how to express, and your milk's getting going anyway.
And you can do it when baby's born, can't you? So leave that one at home.
Absolutely. So it's just in case.
It's a backup.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, we've spoke lots about breastfeeding. Shall we move on to women's choice, and if they choose to formula feed? Can you just talk a little bit about bottle feeding and what we need to know about formula milks?
Okay, yeah, so sort of two things there. So with if you're wanting to breastfeed, we'd say try and avoid formula feeding, and get your breastfeeding established, and get some good support. And if you're not feeling confident, speak to us, look at the signs of effective feeding. If you are formula feeding and bottle feeding, so bottle feeding, we encourage responsive bottle feeding. So responsive bottle feeding, there's some nice NHS videos online on YouTube that show responsive bottle feeding. So always hold your baby close, encourage them to open their mouth by tickling like their top lip with the teeth, and then encourage them to latch onto the bottle. Keep the bottle nice and horizontal so it's not tipped up too much, because that can make the milk
changed, hasn't it, the advice, because we used to do that years ago.
Or
you'd see that a lot, where bottles were tipped upside down.
And a nice and we used to think, oh, that baby fed really fast and really well, but actually absolutely they didn't. So we want a nice paced, comfortable, enjoyable experience for baby. So keeping them close. If they feels like they're taking the milk too fast, lower the bottle a little bit. The other thing that we'd say with bottle feeding, because bottle feeding often everyone wants to bottle feed the baby, but
Yes.
actually it's a different experience every time if lots of people are doing it. So we would encourage you, if you're bottle feeding, to limit the people bottle feeding to no more than 2 people, really.
Yes.
When babies are feeding,
They're
when
bonding,
they're
aren't they?
bonding, they're
Yes.
staring into your eyes and falling in love with your face and
Yes.
feeling safe and secure. And if they're seeing lots of different people every time, it's not as lovely as having that same main caregiver. Also, so feed on one side and then feed them on the other side. So we tend to,
Mimic.
I'm right-handed, so I always tend to go for a bottle in the right hand, baby in my left, but then the baby only gets that experience of the one side. So try and swap sides when you feed, and that's very much like breastfeeding, because we swap side
I've
to
never
side.
heard that before, Lou.
Yeah, so
That's interesting.
I would just to quickly say about formula milks, there's lots of marketing and things out there about what milks are best, but all of the formula milks have to meet the same nutritional standard. If you want independent, unbiased information about formula milks, go to First Steps Nutrition. There's really good information on all of the milks on there, and for formula feeding, it's any first infant milk for the first year of life, and there is no need for follow-on milks at all.
Yeah, I think it's advertising and financially it just has implications, doesn't it, for
It
parents?
does, and we often feel like the more we spend, the better,
better
and we want the
quality
best
is,
for our
yeah.
children. But actually, there's no evidence
Yeah.
that any of them. They are different, but the things that need to be in the milk have to be in all of the milks.
I think recently there's been some, well, it's happened a few times actually, where some formula milk can be recalled, and that can be quite frightening for parents as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been quite a lot about the recall on milk. So to reassure parents, if they did need to change milk, years ago we used to say stick to the same brand,
Yeah.
but actually now, as long as
You
it's
can
a
give any.
first infant milk, you can give any brand. Keep up to date, I'd say. Follow this Food Standards Agency on social media. They're one of the first places where you see updates about formula milk, so that's really a good place
And they
to
also
look.
have an online batch checker as well. So thank you very much, Lou. That was really interesting conversation about feeding. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.